After 4 years of searching, Pacific FC have finally found their Alejandro Diaz replacement, and his name is Alejandro Diaz. Tridents announced on Wednesday that the 29-year-old forward is back with the club. He spent the past few seasons with Vancouver FC, obviously their Salish Sea Derby rival, but he's back on Vancouver Island. He's second all time in the CPL in terms of scoring with 39 goals. We know this Pacific FC team need goals, Alex. They have just 42 in 43 matches over the past 2 seasons in the CPL. Only 20 of those have come from open play. We know Diaz can score. We know we've talked a lot about how at least his profile has been the missing piece for this Pacific FC team for some time. Is this the missing piece for Pacific, Alex?
It's definitely one of them. And they've really just had this giant hole since he left in 22. And they've had some pretty decent strikers come in and try to replace him. I especially think top of mind in Easton Ongaro. You wondered how he was going to fare. They got to bring a guy like Rion Moore was another guy where he seemed like to have potential, but it just didn't click. Some other names too I'm missing in there. But for all the attempts they've had to replace Alejandro Diaz, they can never quite find a guy who would lead the line, who would drop deep, who would run the channels, who would get on the end of crosses. And he was just doing everything for Pacific when he was there. Remember when he was playing as a number 8, even once or twice when James Merriman really needed him. So I think that it's huge for Pacific to have a focal point, because a lot of their offensive struggles all stem from that. Like, I think of the teams over the last 2 years where they would create all the chances and they just wouldn't finish. And now this year the chances have dropped, but it feels like a guy like Marco Bustos, with some of the crosses he's putting in, like they're not even getting the chances because no one's on the end of these crosses. There's, no one for a Josh Hurt to run in behind and then cut it back to, because, maybe their strikers have different instincts. So Diaz, I think, is huge because the style of play with Pacific, they've kind of maintained it over the last few years, but it was so dependent on that trip of the tip of the trident, pun, I guess, somewhat intended. And so it'll be nice for them to have that tip back, because they never really seem to replace it.
Yeah, you look at all the teams that they're kind of chasing right now for that fifth and final playoff spot. And, York's got an Altabelli, Calvary's got a Warshewski, Forge have Brian Wright, Sammy Salter in Ottawa, Thiago Coimbra in Halifax. Like, they all have that one guy leading the line who's reliable for, a goal at least every 2 games, that kind of thing, where, kind of where at least some of your goals are coming from. Pacific obviously haven't had that guy for a few years. So obviously they're hoping Alejandro Diaz will be that. Now, kind of wondering, Alex, is this the big question? Is this the same Alejandro Diaz that's coming back? Because I think he had 10 goals last year and he was obviously solid, but it's been a bit of a difficult year for him this year, both in terms of goals. I think he just has one. His underlying numbers haven't been the best. So what have you seen from Diaz this year? And, are you confident that he can kind of reignite things once he pulls on that purple of Pacific?
I'm confident mainly because of his deployment at Vancouver. We didn't see him play a whole lot as an out-and-out striker. He was kind of asked to play wide. Granted, I guess that's the challenge when you have Taryn Campbell and Alejandro Diaz, and then by the end you had Pate India into the mix, who was pretty favored. All of a sudden, Diaz, with the work he does, was kind of sacrificed and playing in unfamiliar positions. I don't think that got the most out of him. You could see some uncharacteristic frustration. I think of all the yellow cards he's gotten this year, which usually out of character for such a chill, composed guy, especially in front of goal. And so I just don't think he got enough opportunity to get those chances, to get on the end of it. I think at Pacific, what will be nice for him is he's the number 9 again. He's going to lead the line. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There's no, is it going to be him? Is it going to be this guy? It's going to be him. It's going to be him for the rest of the season. And that will give him confidence, because even in that Vancouver team last year, where they weren't the most prolific offensively, yet he gave them a goal almost every 3 games, in some way or some other. Sometimes it'd be, from his own, he would create them themselves. And I think now the fact that he'll go to a Pacific team where not only does he get that responsibility, but he has some guys like a Bustos who is itching out for a striker. I mean, at one point he was leading the league in chances created despite Pacific's malaise in front of goal. I think this could be a bit of a perfect match that will get his confidence going. And when Diaz is confident, it can be tough for defenders to deal with him.
Vancouver FC. They have a Alejandro Diaz replacement as well, and his name is Hugo Mbong, 20-year-old, on loan from Toronto FC. Most recently spent time in the USL with Lexington Soccer Club on loan. 12 appearances as well for the Toronto FC first team. The brother of Ralph Priso. So, Alex, I know you know a thing or two about rent prices in Vancouver. That might be a little good to, be able to maybe share an apartment and, even just having a big brother there who is an established professional now will probably help out young Hugo. But what kind of player is Vancouver FC getting in this young guy who I know had a lot of promise coming through the Toronto FC and Canadian youth international systems, and now gets an opportunity here with a Vancouver FC team that is very young and is very desperate for a player of his profile.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting profile. He's young. He's still decently raw, but he's shown that he can score goals in a decent way. But he's he can drop in, he can contribute in other ways. I think the big thing he's going to need is minutes. He played like 150 this year in the USL. Last year he played barely above 600, so it's clear those two loans maybe weren't the best for him. But when you look back at some of his next pro numbers, he was a kind of a dual threat that would give you a handful of goals and a handful of assists. And I think Vancouver could use a bit of that because, they haven't had a whole lot of chance creation for their forwards. And if an Mbong can maybe come in and play off of an NGI or a Campbell, maybe they play two, you're going to need someone to create and to help do that. And Mbong can maybe be a bit of a link between an out-and-out nine and then a guy like a Mosquita, right? Maybe they can have some sort of system where maybe it's a 2-1 up top, and Mbong's kind of the link between the one of the 10s and a Mosquita and one of the 9s. So I like the Mbong profile, but because of that, because it's not maybe necessarily a pure out-and-out number 9, and I think that's huge because Vancouver had 3 out-and-out number 9s, and they kind of didn't have the puzzle pieces to put it all together, whereas this gives them a little bit of a different look, a bit of a different profile.
Transfer season well and truly open in the Canadian Premier League, and it'll be interesting to see what all of the other clubs do as well in kind of response to this move and the many others as they kind of look to augment their squads for the run in the second half of the season. So looking forward to seeing what other clubs do, but a great way to start it with one of the best players in CPL history in terms of goal scoring, and a young, exciting Canadian coming through as well. So stay tuned. There'll be plenty more, I'm sure, over the coming weeks as the CPL opens up its transfer season.